Hey everybody, I'm on the road. I'm in Texas today. I'll be traveling around America for the next few days, and I'm trying to fit in getting some videos out to you guys to give you some important updates on some things that are going on. Today's video is going to focus on what's happening with the Gaza Strip. I know that everyone's still focused, as we should be. The main event is still Iran, but we can't ignore what's taking place there. And where things stand is that this board of peace that was set up in the wake of President Trump's 20-point plan announced last fall, that this board of peace is now having meetings in Cairo, and Hamas is doing this dance of pretending that they're complying and that they're disarming. Let's get into those headlines here. Okay, here we go. Here's a headline from Sharq al-Awsat. This is a major Arab media source. Proposal would shift 5,000 Hamas employees from military to civilian roles. Three well-informed Palestinian sources told Sharq al-Awsat that negotiators in Cairo have proposed transferring 5,000 employees of the Hamas-run Gaza government from military-related positions to civilian roles as part of efforts to advance a Gaza ceasefire agreement. Okay, so this is what they're saying. So they're meeting in Cairo. This is a news story from yesterday. So this is brand new material that 5,000 employees of the Hamas-run government are going to be transferred from military-related positions to civilian roles. Okay, so they're currently in military-related positions of Hamas, meaning terrorists, and they're simply going to transfer them. Now, I will remind you that the original 20-point Trump plan says explicitly, this is one of the lines in the plan. Here, let me move this over to where we are. Here, right here, this is the 20-point Gaza plan. And look what it says down here. Hamas and other factions agree not to have any role in the governance of Gaza, directly, indirectly, or in any form. And so I don't know how that's consistent with 5,000 employees of the Hamas-run Gaza government who are in military-related positions are going to now assume civilian roles. Anyway, it goes on to say the proposal is intended to bridge differences over the fifth clause covering public employees and the eighth clause dealing with weapons. Now, what are these referring to? This is not the fifth and eighth clause of the Trump 20-point plan. You see, a couple months ago, they announced, the Board of Peace announced a 15-point implementation plan for the peace plan. Okay, and this is right here. This is this 15-point roadmap to complete the implementation of President Trump's Gaza Comprehensive Peace Plan. And this is what they're discussing in Cairo right now. And if we go to the fifth and eighth clauses, the fifth clause states as follows: separating armed factions from governing institutions while also protecting ordinary civil servants and public employees. Gaza cannot recover while armed groups simultaneously operate as governing authorities. At the same time, this point does not seek collective punishment or the removal of ordinary public workers from civilian life. The roadmap explicitly states that civil servants are to be treated lawfully, fairly, and with dignity. What is intended to end is governance through armed structures, not the livelihoods of public servants. Now, I'll also refer us back to the 20-point plan, which is what Israel agreed to. And in the 20-point plan, when it talks about the members of Hamas, it says Hamas members who commit to peaceful coexistence. I don't know what that even means, but it must mean something, even if it's just some perfunctory declaration. And to decommission their weapons will be given amnesty. Members of Hamas who wish to leave Gaza will be provided safe passage. And here we're seeing that we're transferring Hamas military personnel into civilian roles. And anyway, that's the fifth clause of this 15-point plan. And the eighth clause, which they also talked about in that piece, the proposal is gradual decommissioning process. The proposal does not call for immediate surrender or unilateral disarmament. It outlines a phased Palestinian-led and internationally verified process carried out gradually and according to an agreed timetable, Weapons are not transferred to Israel. The proposal explicitly states that weapons would transfer to Palestinians operating under the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, while with international monitoring arrangements. The process is designed to happen incrementally, sector by sector, alongside reciprocal implementation steps, including gradual Israeli withdrawal and the expansion of reconstruction activity. Okay. This is what happens whenever Israel signs an agreement. Israel agrees to certain stipulations. Everyone shakes hands. And then in the implementation of the agreement, in all of the subsequent interpretations of the agreement and additional documents that lead to the further implementation, things change. Clauses get changed. And it's a picking away at what was agreed upon, making it seem like it's the same agreement, but it is not. The 20-point Gaza plan explicitly said that Hamas must be completely disarmed before Israel withdraws at all. It says that quite clearly, that Israel will not withdraw until Hamas is disarmed. It says it. Let's find it right here. Talks about a process of demilitarization of Gaza, and it's supposed to be not Palestinian-led, but under the supervision of independent monitors, and an internationally funded buyback program verified by independent monitors. And then it states down here that the IDF will withdraw based on standards, milestones, and times linked to ISF guarantors in the United States. So Israel's withdrawal is based on the disarming of Hamas. And here we're seeing that they're playing games with this and saying that no. Israel's supposed to withdraw as part of the disarmament of Hamas, which is not what was agreed to. And this is not a cosmetic difference. This is everything. Whether Hamas remains in any kind of administrative role, in any kind of political role, and whether or not their weapons are removed before Israel withdraws, these are the key issues for Israel. The sources, one from Hamas and one from another Palestinian factions, and one from civil society familiar with the Cairo talks, said the plan calls for transferring 5,000 police personnel, that's Hamas police personnel, to civilian positions. Those who refuse the transfer will be placed into retirement. So we're talking about taking Hamas guys with guns, Hamas police, and just moving them into civilian roles in the new Gaza government, which is, of course, not Hamas. How does that track with Hamas having no governing role, both either directly or indirectly? The source described the transfer of 5,000 police officers as a first phase. If Israel or the Board of Peace rejects their integration into the civilian workforce, they would be retired after undergoing security screening. A Board of Peace official told Asharq al-Awsat that vetting has been completed for an initial group of 5,000 recruits. That's new recruits for the new Palestinian police force, who are to be trained as part of a new Palestinian police force under the proposed U.S. plan for governing Gaza. So are any of these Palestinian police officers from Hamas going to end up in the Palestinian police force that is now being vetted and planned? We'll see. At the same time, we have this news item from yesterday as well. Turkey reaffirms backing for Hamas as foreign minister meets with Khalil al-Khaya. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan recently met with Hamas's new leader Khalil al-Khaya, according to Turkey's state-run media. On Thursday, Anadolu agency reported Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan met Wednesday with Khalil al-Khaya, the newly elected head of Hamas's political bureau, and a Hamas delegation. This appears to be the first high-level meeting that Khaya has had since being elected to his new role on July 20th. Khaya is apparently based in Qatar. This echoes other Hamas leaders also based in Qatar. Anadolu, which is state-run, noted that sources said Fidan congratulated Khaya on his appointment during the meeting. The report added Khaya briefed Fidan on the situation in Gaza and occupied West Bank, saying that the Israeli government, led by Prime Minister Netanyahu, has intensified what he described as illegal settlement activities and attacks on holy sites in Jerusalem. He claimed that Hamas is attempting to pave the way for peace negotiations. Now, by the way, when they say attacks on holy sites in Jerusalem, what do you think they mean? There's no Israeli attacks on any holy sites in Jerusalem. What they mean is Jews visiting the Temple Mount. That's right. According to the United Nations, office, it's the OCHA office that tracks activity in Judea, Samaria, in the what they call the occupied territories, which for them includes East Jerusalem. They list as settler terrorism, as settler violence. They list every visit by Jews to the Temple Mount. Okay, so when they talk about Israel attacking holy sites in Jerusalem, they mean Jews visiting the Temple Mount. He claimed that Hamas is attempting to pave the way for peace negotiations. Of course, Hamas is supposed to relinquish its governing authority in Gaza to the U.S.-backed Board of Peace. Chaya said that Hamas is also working on reconciliation with other Palestinian groups, apparently in reference to Fatah, which runs the Palestinian Authority. Interesting. So Hamas is going to surrender all of its governing authority, but it's also going to reconcile with the Palestinian Authority. Okay. Fidan reiterated Turkey's strong support for what he called the just cause of the Palestinians in every field and on every international platform. Turkey's top diplomat said Ankara would continue making every effort to increase the delivery of humanitarian aid to Gaza. He also said that Turkey will continue supporting the Gaza peace process and expressed appreciation for the role Hamas has played in those efforts. Okay, so color me skeptical if Hamas is actually not going to be playing any role, either directly or indirectly, if the head of Hamas is having meetings with the Turkish foreign minister, who's one of the mediators. And then we have this. This is also from yesterday. This is another coverage of this same negotiation, but it adds in a few interesting details. Mediators talked to Hamas about second phase as Israel strikes Gaza. Israeli strikes killed at least 3 people, including 2 children, in the Gaza Strip on Thursday. Health officials said, while mediators held new talks. This is from today. While mediators held new talks with Hamas leaders to work towards full implementation of a U.S.-brokered Gaza peace plan. In Cairo, Hamas leaders held talks with mediators from Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey. Okay, let's just pause right there. The mediators between Israel and Hamas are Turkey, that is totally hostile to Israel, Qatar, that is totally hostile to Israel, and Egypt, that gets a lot of money from the United States and has a peace treaty with Israel, but is basically totally hostile to Israel. So they had talks. So Hamas, that's who Hamas is talking to. Those are the mediators over the implementation of the second phase of President Donald Trump's Gaza plan as presented to them by the Board of Peace that oversees the implementation. On Thursday, that's today, a Hamas official said the group was coming with a positive and good response, yet he didn't say whether the group has agreed to fully disarm. A key sticking point in the talks over the past 4 months. A key sticking point. It is what the whole thing is about. Let's remember, what this whole thing is about is removing Hamas from Gaza so that the Gaza Strip can move on to a different future. A different future which is not run by Hamas, not educated by Hamas. That is the whole goal. From Israel's perspective, that's all that matters, is that Hamas is completely removed and that we can, again, reconstruct Gaza on a different basis. So sources close to Hamas saying that the group was willing to, that they didn't say whether the group has agreed to fully disarm is, of course, a key sticking point. Hamas wants Israel to commit to ending attacks on Gaza and withdrawing its forces. Israel will not commit to that. Israel is going to remove Hamas. Look, this whole deal, this whole 20-point plan, which was supposed to be implemented very quickly, it had certain timelines attached to it for the withdrawal. None of that has been adhered to. And Israel said at the outset, look, we're willing to try this, but we are not going to compromise on our objective of removing Hamas from the Gaza Strip. Hamas is committed to our destruction. Sources close to Hamas said the group was willing to confine and store heavy weapons. I don't know what a heavy weapon is, under a Palestinian body, not handed over to Israel. Hamas didn't comment on that. So sources close to Hamas say basically that Hamas is willing to give their weapons to other people who they're friends with. It is also not yet clear what would be the fate of light or personal weapons, or whether the new Hamas stance would be accepted by Israel and the Board of Peace. This brings us back to this 8th point here: gradual decommissioning process. The proposal does not call for immediate surrender or unilateral disarmament. It's talking about a phased process. Weapons are not transferred to Israel. The proposal explicitly states that weapons would transfer to Palestinians operating under the National Council for the Administration of Gaza, with international monitoring arrangements. The process is designed to happen incrementally. So this clause here in this 15-point implementation plan of the 20-point plan actually contradicts the 20-point plan. See what's happening here? It contradicts it. It doesn't really demand Hamas. It doesn't really demand Hamas disarming as a precondition for moving forward. That is the problem. And now we have the Jerusalem Post reporting on this. Wait, was there more for me to say? Oh yeah, there's another piece here I want to share with you. Israel wants Hamas to cede power completely in Gaza and to fully disarm. Yeah, Hamas dissolved a de facto government last month. Remember, they made that announcement that they were dissolving the government, but they kept a caretaking body to maintain the provision of vital services to residents. In other words, they kept doing the same thing, but they said that they're no longer in charge. This is an Arab news outlet, so they're reporting it this way. And when it says Israel wants Hamas to cede power completely and for Gaza and to fully disarm, it's not just Israel wants that, it's what was agreed to. Okay, and all of this other stuff that's being talked about and negotiated is all trying to change the terms that were agreed to. That's really, look, this whole video could have been 2 sentences long. Israel makes agreements, and then in the implementation, all that the other side tries to do is roll them back and change them. The Israeli military on Wednesday said it had struck a mosque in the Gaza Strip, which it said had been used by Hamas as a weapons storage facility. Over the past week, the Israeli military struck and dismantled several Hamas weapons storage facilities in the central and northern Gaza Strip. One of the storage facilities had been established inside a mosque in the northern Gaza Strip. It said, saying advance warnings were given to civilians. Amir Abu al-Amrain, the Director General of the Ministry of Awqaf and Religious Affairs in the Gaza Strip, said the Israeli authorities had completely destroyed the mosque in the airstrike. The occupation cites false pretexts, such as the alleged presence of military sites, to justify these crimes, he said, calling for an urgent intervention to protect mosques and places of worship. Yes, the mosque was used as a weapons depot. But now listen to Israel's description, meaning this isn't Israel's description, it's the Jerusalem Post. It's an Israeli outlet describing the same negotiations going on in Cairo. And we can already see the differences. Discussions with mediators in Cairo are continuing and making progress, according to a diplomatic source who spoke to the Jerusalem Post on Thursday, today, as negotiators work to finalize a comprehensive roadmap for Gaza's future governance and security arrangements. According to the source, the roadmap is designed as a balanced and pragmatic framework centered on the complete decommissioning of all weapons and phased transition of responsibilities to a technocratic government. Quote, there will be no exceptions for certain weapons or certain people. The source said, one authority, one law, one weapon. The source said the proposed framework establishes a process for eliminating all tunnels, weapons depots, and weapons production facilities throughout the Gaza Strip, describing it as a comprehensive effort rather than a limited security arrangement. At the conclusion of the implementation process, the source said, there would be no remaining terrorist infrastructure in Gaza. Hamas would have no governing or military role, except that Khalil al-Khaya is meeting with the foreign minister of Turkey, and they're having a diplomatic meeting, and they're making plans. Hamas would have no governing or military role, either publicly or behind the scenes, in a model similar to that being applied to Hezbollah in Lebanon, hopefully. Under the proposal, all weapons, both heavy and light, would come under the full control of the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, in coordination with and supported by the ISF, which the source said is led by a 2-star U.S. Special Forces general. The agreement also stipulates that there will be no Israeli withdrawal from the original Yellow Line unless full disarmament is implemented. Are we talking completely different languages here? I just read you a report of the same negotiations from Sharq al-Awsat that said that Hamas would only agree to disarm incrementally alongside Israeli withdrawals. The diplomatic source emphasized that the roadmap is based on reciprocal implementation rather than trust between the parties. There we go. And then back to an Arab site, the New Arab, Ball in Israel's court as Palestinian groups agreement narrows Gaza ceasefire gaps. Really? So just a couple paragraphs from this one. The eighth clause, that's the eighth clause of the 15-point plan, this one about decommissioning weapons. The eighth clause deals with heavy weapons. Under the revised proposal, discussions over heavy weapons, tunnels, and military production sites would begin only after Israel fulfills its obligations under the Sharm el-Sheikh agreement. The National Committee enters Gaza, and an international stabilization force is deployed. Okay. Let's go back to the 20-point plan. In the 20-point plan, it states that Hamas will disarm. That's all the way near the beginning of the plan. All the way near the beginning of it, it states that once all the hostages are returned, that happened months and months ago, Hamas members who commit to peaceful coexistence and to decommission their weapons will be given amnesty, right? They're supposed to disarm right away. And the international stabilization force comes all the way down here. And here it says that Hamas agrees not to have any role, and all the military infrastructure, the tunnels, everything is all going to be destroyed. There's going to be a process of decommissioning all the weapons by an international body. And then later on, it talks about bringing in the international stabilization force to deploy in Gaza. Okay? That's the process here. And only after that, down here, the IDF will progressively hand over Gaza territory it occupies to the International Stabilization Force gradually as the International Stabilization Force assumes control. And what do we read here? Under the revised proposal, discussions over heavy weapons, tunnels, and military production sites would begin only after Israel fulfills its obligations, meaning that they start withdrawing and the International Stabilization Force is deployed. They want the International Stabilization Force to be deployed prior to any discussions over their weapons, their tunnels, their military production. According to the source, revisions concerning government employees strengthen legal guarantees protecting their rights, while amendments to the weapons clause linked implementation directly to the timetable for Israel's withdrawal and introduced agreed mechanisms for addressing armed groups collaborating with Israel. Now, what does that mean? These Palestinian groups met to talk about what to do about collaborators, about armed groups that are working against Hamas. This is not the deal that Israel ever agreed to. And let's go back to this 15 points here again. It talks about the International Stabilization Force in here. Look what it says about it. Under the roadmap, that's this document, the 15 points, the ISF would deploy between Israeli and Palestinian-controlled areas. Between Israeli and Palestinian-controlled areas. Protect humanitarian operations and support the decommissioning process. They're envisioning that the International Stabilization Force is not a security force that comes in after Hamas is disarmed to stabilize the Gaza Strip and work with the IDF. No. The International Stabilization Force comes in before Hamas is disarmed, and it deploys between Israel, between the IDF, and the Palestinian-controlled areas. Meaning they see the International Stabilization Force as a peacekeeping force, quote-unquote peacekeeping force, like UNIFIL, that goes between the Israelis and the Palestinians, essentially making it far more difficult for Israel to do what it needs to do to fight terrorism. This is not what Israel agreed to. And let's wrap this up with this. Cabinet gives initial approval for international force in Gaza with some 200 troops. This is the Israeli version of what we've currently agreed to. The Israeli Security Cabinet on Sunday, this past Sunday, agreed to approve the limited entry of the International Stabilization Force under the Board of Peace, led plan for Gaza, which would include 200 troops from friendly countries, Israeli officials told the Times of Israel. ISF troops would first deploy along the borders of a pilot humanitarian zone in Gaza being planned by the Board of Peace in the area of the flattened city of Rafah. Now, what is this talking about? So in the Gaza Strip, there's the area that's on the Israeli side of the yellow line that is in full control of the IDF. In that area, Israel is planning with the Board of Peace is planning, but in cooperation with Israel, to deploy a pilot humanitarian zone that is outside the governance of Hamas completely, totally under IDF control, but with this Board of Peace working with the IDF, controlling the area, and they would move Gazans into that area. They would move Gazans into that area, they would no longer be under the thumb of Hamas. They'd no longer be under their authority. Everyone would be vetted as they cross over, and the ISF would start to operate there as a security force. Israel maintains that the IDF will continue to hold the yellow line, and there will be no further withdrawal whatsoever until Hamas has been completely disarmed and the Gaza Strip has been fully demilitarized. The cabinet also decided that Israel would determine which countries are permitted to contribute personnel to the force. The official continued, saying only countries with which Israel has a peace agreement and which are not acting against the state of Israel or its officials in international forums will be eligible. I think this is a very reasonable demand. Israel saying, look, we want to have a peaceful relationship with the Gaza Strip. We want to disarm Hamas. We want to remove it from being a threat to Israel ever again. And yes, of course, we want to have an international stabilization force. We agree to that, have them come in and provide security. We don't want to be doing that. We don't want to be the police force there. But we also don't want enemy forces in Gaza. So we're only going to allow in forces that are from countries that we have peace deals with. We have peace deals with a whole bunch of Arab countries. Okay, so it says here that this condition, first it says that it would preclude Indonesia, who had originally agreed because they don't have a peace deal with Israel. It would also apparently rule out troops from Turkey, which has been among the harshest critics of Israel's war against Hamas, launched after the October 7th massacre, and which has hosted Hamas leaders. At this stage, the force is expected to consist of approximately 200 personnel from friendly countries such as Uganda and Morocco, the official said. While 3 other countries, Albania, Kazakhstan, and Kosovo, have also agreed to contribute troops to the ISF, Morocco is slated to be the first of them to actually deploy troops in Gaza. Officials familiar with the Board of Peace's plans told the Times of Israel. The Board of Peace has been promoting the plan for several months. It envisions, now here it explains more about this pilot zone, it envisions the establishment of a pilot humanitarian zone in the Rafah area of southern Gaza, from which Israeli troops would withdraw and be replaced by personnel from the ISF. The arrangement would allow an initial group of vetted Gazans to relocate from Hamas-controlled territory. Hamas has so far refused to disarm and envisioned under U.S. President Donald Trump's 20-point plan for Gaza. And the board has been struggling to get Israeli approval on certain key components of the plan. Of course, you've been struggling because Hamas is not disarmed. I welcome steps by Israel that enable the deployment of the ISF, said Board of Peace High Representative Nikolai Mladenov. It is a critical part of the agreed framework for the stabilizing of Gaza, supporting demilitarization, and enabling the transition to effective Palestinian transitional administration. The focus is now on ensuring that we move forward with the 20-point plan for Gaza, including the implementation of the roadmap as presented by the mediators. And that roadmap, as I showed you, has some significant discrepancies between it and the original 20-point plan. Look, bottom line is this: Israel is going to hold firm. Israel is not going anywhere until Hamas is completely disarmed, completely removed, and has no role to play. The entire concept behind the Trump 20-point plan, if we go back to those glory days when it was announced as this great peace deal that was coming to the Middle East, is that we are going to move forward with a Gaza Strip that is no longer governed by those who want to destroy Israel. The Middle East today is in a struggle between the moderates, the legitimate moderates who want to have peace with Israel, peace with the West, and prosperity, and want to reject this Muslim Brotherhood jihadist ideology. The United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia kind of wavers in that. Bahrain is certainly on board. Morocco is on board. Other Muslim countries like Somaliland are on board. There are many moderate Arab countries that are on board. There are some that are privately moderate that are afraid to say anything publicly. And then you have the jihadists, the ones who are committed to the Muslim Brotherhood ideology, who want to destroy the state of Israel. Chief among them these days is Turkey, Qatar. These are countries that are hostile to Israel in every way. And Israel is simply not going to allow these forces to take control of the governance there. And the only way to get past this, the only way to start re-education of the population so that there can be peace, the only way to move forward to a brighter future is to remove everyone of this ilk from positions of power. And that's why the 20-point plan that Israel agreed to said that Hamas can have no governing role in Gaza directly or indirectly. And that's why I think this pilot idea of setting up housing in an area totally controlled by the IDF in Gaza, moving population into it, where it can be governed by the Board of Peace, overseen by the Americans, and there we could start a different type of education. Hamas is not involved there. I think that Israel, this is my own feeling, but I'm not an expert in the security issues. My own feeling is that Israel should have made arrangements early on, once they started taking areas of Gaza and cleaning them out, of moving population into those areas, providing humanitarian aid for them there, providing housing for them there, where they have nothing to do with Hamas, and Hamas is not in control at all. The civilian population is the greatest asset Hamas has. Removing the civilian population from the control of Hamas is the only way forward. Look, in the big picture, we really have to think about, the real tragedy of all this is that if the Arabs who live in the Gaza Strip would simply all say tomorrow, hey, we don't want to kill Jews anymore. We don't want to destroy Israel anymore. We just want to live a normal life. And we're not fighting anymore. You know what would happen is they would become the most secure and prosperous and free Arabs in the entire Middle East. Think about Israeli innovation, Israeli companies, and what they could do with a labor force that's willing peacefully to work. And they would be part of the thriving, more than thriving, the very prosperous Israeli economy. They could benefit from that. They would have a better standard of living than almost everyone in the Arab world if they just chose that. And instead, they've been radicalized by decades and decades of Muslim Brotherhood, genocidal ideology, Hamas education system, paid for by the United Nations, and they just can't get out of their own way. So it's a very tragic situation. The biggest losers in all of this are not Israel. The biggest loser in all of this is the people in Gaza themselves. And we just have to pray that Israel holds firm and doesn't budge on our needs. Look, a last thing here before we go, I want to tell you about an event that's taking place in New York. I'm going to be speaking on this coming Sunday, just a couple days from now, in New York. The most dangerous man in America. I'm going to be speaking about Zoran Mamdani and what his combination of socialism and Islamism really means as the mayor of New York. The location is going to be, it'll be at 5 p.m. on Sunday, but the location is to be announced. Once you register, you will receive information about the location. We have to be very careful these days about publicizing locations of things in places like New York. Sadly, that's where we are. So you can click the QR code, which you see there in small, but here you can click it. Here it's on the screen. You can also go to the you can also go to the website Israel365.com/PWNY. That's my initials, PW, and then NY New York. So Israel365.com/PWNY to register for this coming Sunday, or click the QR code on your screen, and hope to see you there if you're in the New York area. And I hope to see you there. And let us know if you're interested in attending that. And we'll keep praying. We'll keep praying. Let's remember always that, God was on the throne yesterday. He's on the throne today, and he'll be on the throne tomorrow. So no matter what kind of problems we have in the political sphere with the various wars, we know the end is good, and we know that God is in control. And may God bless you.